Hello, beautiful students. I hope you are doing beautiful and great. So, I am Sonika Seni, your social science teacher, faculty, whatever you say it. So, previously we have taken two classes that basically talking about rise of nationalism in Europe, and we have did done in detail the first section of it that deals with various keywords. Right? I shall repeat once for few seconds that what have we done. So we have covered like what do you mean by nation, what do you mean by nationalism, right? What do you mean by nationalism? What are the basically you can say the different theories about nationalism, right? What do you mean by nationalism? Is it the collection of languages, regions, or it is just more than that? Then we have covered that what is the definition of democracy? What do you mean by democracy? What is absolutism, right? What do you mean by absolutism? So these are the words which we have done, right? For example, we have done what is liberty, what is equality, what is fraternity. Liberty, equality, right? And we have done what is fraternity. Then we have covered, right, what is plebiscite. So these are the important meanings, right, that you must be able to guess so that you are able to understand the entire chapter. Then we have done that how there was a little bit of rise of nationalism, right, rise of nationalism. And then we have seen that how these French armies were walking towards outside the France, and what was happening, there was a entry of Mr. Macho Man, right? There was entry of Mr. Macho Man, who? The Napoleon Bonaparte, right? And basically, he was going, right? He was trying to conquest what? The territories. He was trying to conquest the territories outside the France. And what was happening? He basically lost the war. He lost the war. Now we will be doing that. What happened after when he lost the war? We will be doing certain classes, the liberal ideas, conservatism ideas, and what happened after he lost the war, right? Kya, or I would say that was there any rise of nationalism, or there was anything, right? People went to back, right? Were they having they were happy with the Napoleon Bonaparte decisions, or they went back? They went back again to the monarch. We will do all such things in this chapter or in this next our presentation. Chalo, let's start our class. And if you haven't watched the previous lectures, so as to basically continue the sessions, it would be good that if you watch those lectures, because I have dealt with each and every aspect in every detail. Chaliye. So let's start today. So this is basically what? So what is happening that in the mid 18th century, as we understand what nation states did not exist. There were no unified Germany, Italy, or Switzerland, only a fragment. So this I have basically made you understand. I made you understand in the previous class also, that what nation today we call as a nation, like India is a nation, right? India is a nation. Us waqt, okay, at that time, nation was not, definition was not what you think today, right? So nation actually didn't exist. मैंने पहले बहुत डिटेल में समझाया है. If you want, you can go to the previous lecture. So these nation states did not exist, right? There was no unified Germany. They were basically, what happened? Suppose this is a Germany, right? This is Germany. So there were little states in those, and there was a kingdom, right? There was a kingdom. And what is happening? Like these different kingdoms are speaking different languages. So let's say someone is speaking Polish, like someone is speaking German. So they were speaking different languages. They were not unified. They were not unified in terms of languages. They were fragmented. What do you mean by fragmented? बिखरे हुए हैं, right? This and various kingdoms and various cantons. Now what is happening? What is happening over here? Sovereignty rested entirely in the crown. What do you mean by sovereignty? The decision-making power, right? The decision-making power. Sovereignty is with the crown. Crown, what is crown? The king. Eastern and Central Europe were locked under autocratic monarchies ruling over highly diverse, disconnected populations. How can you say disconnected? Why? Because they were having what? They were having different cultures, right? They were having different what? Languages. They were having different languages. So what was happening? That since they were basically bifurcated, and due to this region, there was only one monarch, right? One monarch means one king or one dynasty, you can say, which were ruling all these people, right? So there was no concept of nation states at that point of time, right? Chaliye. Coming to the next slide, here is now how basically in this book क्या हुआ है, they have given a beautiful example to make you understand this example, that what was happening at that point of time. They have given the example of Habsburg mosaic, right? Habsburg mosaic means basically a combination of patches. So the only unifying mechanism across this chaotic patchwork was a shared allegiance to the emperor. That means there was nothing that could unify those people, not even the languages, because there was different languages, there was different political identity, even the ethnicity, all the culture was different. Then what was the unification? That the only common thing between all these states were, right, or amongst all these states were what? It was what? It was what? It was only the same emperor, that we belong to the same emperor, that's it. There was nothing common in all these states. So this is a basically example. This is the example in which there was like Lombard Venetia. So suppose there are peasantries over there. So they are Romanians who is speaking what? Roman. There's Hungary who is speaking what? Magyars. Hungary is the name of the place where Magyars is the language, right? Galicia, we are speaking what? Polish. Alpine regions and Bohemia. Right. Now you will be saying, ma'am, what are these states? Right. What is this? This is basically a map at the time, right, of the Europe. At the time there were what? These are the regions who were speaking different languages, right? And this was known as Habsburg. What do you mean by Habsburg? Basically the kingdom, right? Kingdom. It's the Habsburg Empire or the kingdom in which these were what? These were the places. We cannot say them as nation states, right? We cannot say them as nation states yet. Okay. So this was the example which was given in your NCERT book about the different cities of speaking different languages. Okay. Now, see, I have, wait a minute. So I've added this, I think ये बाद में आएगा. So I've added this map to make you understand that what was happening over that time. So this is Prussia, okay? In 80, ignore this, right? Because we are not talking about 1871 right now. Just you have to ignore it because I couldn't find the map before 1871. Right? I'll explain this when Prussia will come. There's a point of the Prussia, what was Prussia and what is happening over there. So we will be doing it afterwards. Chaliye. So the pulse of revolution. Now, what is happening? As I said that, see, understand the concept, what it is saying. When Napoleon Bonaparte, right? So there were two types of people. One was conservatives. And these conservatives are known as who wants to go tradition, like who wants to go back. Always remember, what do you mean by conservatives? What do you mean by conservatism? Who wants to go back? Conservatives are those people who wants to go back, and this theory is known as conservatism. That means they want what? Monarch. They want kingdom. They think that only this thing can stabilize what? The people. This thing can stabilize what? The states. Why? Because Napoleon Bonaparte was trying to conquest each and everybody. He was trying to maintain certain things which they didn't like. The second part is revolutionaries. The second part, who was? Revolutionaries. Who are those revolutionaries? Who were basically going for the revolution? Who is going for the revolution? And what was the revolution? The revolution is to create what? Again, all those ideals: democracy, liberty, equality before the law, universal adult suffrage. That means one vote. So, what is happening today? Yes, so. So, see, what we have done, when we have started, how Napoleon invades Italy, how Napoleon basically invades Italy, and in 1851, right, we said that in a war of Leipzig, he basically lost the war. Then, now we'll be studying the independence of Greeks and how this revolution surged across Europe. There was a middle class was arising. We'll talk about that, how this middle class was arising and what was their demands, what was the theory behind that, right? Till here we will do today, and then further we'll be dealing with the unification of Italy, Germany, and how this basically surges. That means the slave nationalism, which means surges in Habsburg and Ottoman empires. Okay. Now, so as I told you that in this entire Europe, there were three types of classes. Two were already existing. One was a middle class that came into being during that time. Okay. So The landed aristocracy, which means spoke French. So this is the aristocracy class. When we say aristocracy class, you can just say high influential people. High influential people at the time, or you can say today's rich people like Ambanis and all, right? So these are the this is the aristocracy who spoke French for diplomacy in high society. They think that, okay, they thought that we are high class people, we will speak only one language and that is French, and united by complex transnational marriage ties. That means they used to uh, do marriage. They used to do marriage only within their family, within their small families, within the small families, within the small contacts, their ties. So that's why is to maintain what? The aristocracy class. They don't want to get married. You have seen in the Bollywood movies, high class, low class. High class wale low class mein kya hota hai? Shaadi nahi karte. So that is why they were not doing marriages in outside their class. Wealth tied to rural estates and urban town houses. That means they were having houses and properties. They were having large amount of properties. They were rich, influential people. So this is the aristocracy class. Right? Then is a peasants class. Then is a peasant class. इसमें then is a peasant class. आज मेरा notepad is not working properly. I am just wait a minute. So there was a peasant majority where in the east, right, and tenant farmers in the west. So suppose this is the Europe. So in the east, right, in the east there were serfs. They were serfs. We are talking about what? We are talking about peasants class. Who are peasants? I have already told you. Peasants are those persons who are working on agricultural lands. Whether they're working on the agricultural lands, whether their own lands, or maybe with the landlords, and they are the tenant farmers in the west. Okay, ma'am. What is the difference between this peasants, tenant farmers and serfs? See, peasants are nothing but they are those people who are growing, or you can say those who are working on agricultural lands, who are working in the profession of what? Agriculture. Then what are tenant farmers? See, tenant farmers, ये कहाँ है? आपके west में है, of Europe. Tenant farmers are those farmers who are basically tenant. They do not own the lands. They are just the tenants. They have taken the lands for some time from whom? The landlords, and they're paying the rent to whom? To the landlords. Whereas serfs means forced. That means there is a basically you can say a pact, you can say a pact with whom? The landlords. It is a forced peasantry. There's a difference between peasants and peasantry. Forced peasantry, let's say there are terms and conditions. For example, I have taken some loans from the landlord, right? And the landlord forced me to work on the lower wages. Landlord forced me that you have to work for 2 to 3 years on my lands because you have taken the loans. So they cannot go out of that contract. They cannot go out of that contract. That is the peasant class were there. The only thing which you have to understand is that there was an aristocracy class, there was a peasants class. Got my point? Now, this was a new middle class, which is more important, where यहाँ से questions भी बनते हैं. The new middle class, what was happening? Forced by industrialization. So, first of all, you have to understand this middle class कहाँ से आई? This middle class came by the industrialization, right? For example, अब आप देखो, just imagine a simple scenario, very simple scenario. What is happening in India also, right? What was happening during independence? Rural laborers were not getting any amount. They were forced to go to or migrate to what? Urban areas. Industrialization is happening. New factories, new manufacturing industries. What is happening? They are getting jobs over there. So new middle class is happening. Why? Because of industrialization. In this industrialization process, there are what? The peasants are turning into laborers. Right? The peasants are turning into factory laborers. Right? They're turning into what? Factory laborers. Then those middle class is also middle intelligentsia. For example, students. For example, college professors, the doctors, the lawyers, right? So comprise of industrialized, since suppose there's an industrialization process, so there will be employer also, there will be big business people also, and professionals. Then educated liberal and the primary, who are basically carrying what? The nationalist ideas. So as I told, that any person who is educated, who is in the urban towns, who is an industrialist, or you can say the laborers, that is what called as new middle class. Neither they were too poor like peasants, nor they were too rich like aristocracy class. So this was emerging. Now in this rise of nationalism in Europe, you will understand that how this middle class were the main, you can say, carriers of nationalist ideas, that is liberty, democracy, fraternity, universal adult suffrage. What do you mean by universal adult suffrage? Right? I'm repeating it again. It is mentioned in the NCERT also. that universal adult suffrage is nothing but it is the right to vote. It is the right to vote, which means that any person, every person in the entire country, we have universal adult suffrage in our country. Why? Because everyone who is above 18 years of age has the right to vote. Universal adult suffrage has the right to vote, right? So this is universal adult suffrage for which they were fighting. Okay, let's take our chapter forward. Now, the liberal blueprint. Now, see, as I told, there were two ideas, right? One idea was of the conservatism. That means conservative ideas. We'll be taking it right in our next slide. Now, what was the blueprint of liberal ideas? What do want? Who are those liberals who wanted their country to be free? Or not country, because at that time there was no concept of a nation. Who wanted the area, or you can say, in which they are residing, they wanted it to be free. Free from what? Free from kingdoms, kings, the absolutism, the monarch. So what they wanted, so if I divide that, the entire two, in the political architecture or in the economic architecture, how will it go? So liberal nationalism means liberal means free. जैसे आप बोलते हैं ना that I am liberal in nature, I am free, I have a free hand. When we say nationalism, that means they are going towards that kind of nationalism ideas that is taking their to what? Freeing what? Themselves. Now, first of all, you have to understand what was their idea of liberalism. They said that government by active consent. That means there will be a government and we will choose that government, right? It's not about the kingdom jo by birth chalta aa rahega. We will choose that government. Then end of autocracy and aristocratic privileges. Autocracy is what? The kingdom autocracy. What do you mean by autocracy? I think I've explained it. Autocracy. What do you mean by autocracy? It just means autocracy means one ruler, right? Autocracy means there is one ruler, and that here one ruler is what? One king. There is no one who can basically go against the one ruler or the one king. Every decision will be done by the king. There will be no consent of the people. That is known as autocracy. So it says, liberal idea says that there shall be end of autocracy. There shall be end of what? Aristocratic privileges. Aristocratic privileges kya the? If you remember that only you have the right to vote. You will not have to pay the taxes, right? Then implementation of constitutions and representative parliaments. Representative parliament, that means people will be voted to whom? The people, not the kings, and there shall be a constitution. So this was the political architecture of the liberal viewpoint. And coming to the economic architecture, absolute freedom of markets. What do you mean by absolute freedom of markets? See, absolute freedom of market means that you do not have to pay taxes whenever you are crossing one border to another border, right? The markets were not free. At the time, what was happening that markets, right? Wait, let me write. I hope that is visible. So markets were not free, right? They were not free because let's say this is, we'll do an example, right? We'll do a detailed example in that, don't worry. So let's say this is one state or this is another state, right? I cannot call a state an area. So whenever this is going to this another state, so they have to pay a lot of what? Taxes. There was a different weights and measure systems were different. Let's say let's say if there is 1 kgs, in one set it is 1000 grams and in other kgs it is 900 grams. Now you'll be like, ma'am, aise kaise hota hai? Us waqt aise hi tha. There were different weights and different measure systems. So due to which there was no what? There was no parallel system, right? There was no consistency, there was no stability. And so what they wanted absolute freedom of markets from what? The taxes. Then abolition of state imposed trade restrictions. Again, I told the taxes, the trade restrictions that were put by whom? The kings and the monarchs. Then creation of unified economic zones. So they wanted that there will be economic zones which is unified in nature. What do you mean by unified? Same taxes, right? If I have to pay taxes, I shall pay only once or twice. Not that if I am going to 9 states, I have to pay nine times. Then standard weight of measures. Every weight and measure shall be shared in same, unified, only one, right? So that there shall not be any kind of losses to them, right? Now, this is the example which was this is a case study, you can say, right? This is a case study of Zollverein, right? In 1834, sorry. So as I told you, this is basically a name of custom union, right? This is the name of what? Custom union. You understand what do you mean by custom union? See, custom union means it is a union of people, right? It is a union of people that comes together and decides few things, and they decided these things and they said that we will be following this, right? And what do you mean by customs? The taxes, the rules of business, the rules of markets, the rules of weights and measures. So that is basically customs. And union, that means a union of people which decided this. And the name of the union was Zollverein. In 1834, what is happening? What is happening? See, in 1834, what is happening? This Zollverein, right? Prussia. Now we will see this map, right? Led customs union welded German states together economically before they were ever united politically. So it says that they are not united politically yet. They are not united politically yet. There is no parliament, there is no government, there is no, you can say, there are kings. But before they were united politically, they tried to unify. They tried to make a unified what? Custom union, or you can say the economic union, by these measures. I will show you the map of the Prussia so that you understand that what is happening. First of all, understand what were they trying to do. Abolish tariff barriers across borders. So there were so many tariff barriers. Tariff means taxes. Understand it. Tariff means taxes. So abolished it. For example, in your NCERT it is being given that they had to pay like 30 times, more than 30 times taxes. It was reduced to what? 2. Slash the number of regional currencies from over 30 to 2. Okay, this is the example of currencies. This is the example of currencies which I was talking about. So there were 30 types of currencies which were reduced to what? 2. Built a massive interconnected railway network to accelerate trade. So they built a railway network to accelerate trade. And one more thing which is missing over here is the standards, right? Which is missing over here is, okay, this is not visible, is standards weights of measures, right? Standard weights and measures. That means they made the entire weights and measure system completely uniform. कि अगर यहाँ पे kgs में हो रहा है, if 1 kg is let's say 1000 grams, so it shall be 1000 grams also in the another state. Okay. So before I proceed, right? Before I proceed, I shall show you the map what I was referring to. So as I said, I could not get a map of this here, so just ignore it first. It is just to give you insight. It is not in the NCERT, it is just to give you insight that what was Prussia at that point of time. See, it was parts of Germany. Ek second. No? So it was parts of Germany. It was part of like Poland, then parts of Russia, specifically this Königsberg, right? And this Austria-Hungary, right? Austria and Hungary. So as I said that they were not nation states, they were not nation states. So what is happening? This area, some parts of this area, some parts of this area, some parts of this area, they were collectively known as what? Prussia. For example, India, है ना? India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, they were collectively known as what? They were collectively in ancient India. कुछ तो बोलते थे ना उसको इंडिया बिफोर नेशन, जब उसको क्या बोलते थे? हिंदोज, लाइक इंदस या कोई बोलता था इंदस बोलता था, कोई बोलता था दक्षिणापथ बोलता था. तो ये नेम्स जो है दैट kept on changing. They kept on changing. Dakshinapथ was known as the southern part of the India, and the northern part of India was known as Hindus or Indus. So similarly, these were the parts that were in the Prussia. So this basically what was happening in this, they made a what? They made that custom union, right? They made that custom union. So if you see this again, what I'm trying to say is this: they made a custom union of Zollverein. So I'm trying to conclude my class that what we have read today, we have seen that what is aristocracy class, what is peasantry class, and what is a middle class. So there's a base creating. Aristocracy class were in the monarch kingdom. Middle class will help in what? The rise of revolution, the rise of nationalism in Europe. Then we have understood the concept of what? The nationalism. Then one more important point I forgot to tell, and it is important. So whenever there was a political architecture, we're defining that how should our nation should be. For they didn't know the equality before law, right? They knew about equality before the law, that everyone shall be equal. They knew about that equality before the law, but that everyone shall be equal. But there was no universal adult suffrage, right? Which means was explicitly excluded. Voting was restricted to property owning men. They were like, see, I will understand you. I will make you understand. These voting rights were exclusively for men and only those people who were holding property. It was not having with the poor people. It was not having with the women. That means even they were fighting, or even they were saying that there was equality before the law, but there was no universal adult suffrage. यहाँ पे clearly there was written in the NCERT that it was excluded at that point of time. So yes, what we have read is again the liberal ideas. In the next class we will be reading about ideas. So this was the political architecture, this was the economic architecture. We are just trying to understand the background. We are trying to understand the background that what was happening after the Napoleon Bonaparte lost the war. What is happening? One is the conservative ideas, then other is what? The liberal ideas. Then we have read about the classes and the middle class erupting. Then the next class we will be reading about their conservative ideas, and then there was a basically some Vienna convention, not convention. Let me just read. I'll show you the slides. Signatures of all the. Yes, this was a bit. Bob, nahi, ये नहीं है. Wait a minute. So in the next class, I'll show you. Vienna Pact. I think it was not convention, it was a Vienna Pact between all those nations who were conquered by Napoleon, and they were trying to go to the conservatism ideas. They didn't want the new ideas, they were trying to go for the conservative ideas, following the principles of conservatism, and that was a Vienna Pact, and we'll be reading it in the next class. So that's it for today. I hope you like the session, and if you like it, then please share it with your mates so that they also get to know, and in other classes, we'll try to take this lesson further. Thank you so much.